7:15 in the evening is the best time to start dinner. I had always cooked at that time, back when my husband was alive, back when we had our own house with a spacious kitchen and a view of the garden. Now I'm standing at someone else's stove in someone else's house, but the habit remains the same. The potatoes are almost done. The meat is stewing in a skillet with onions, and the smell fills the kitchen with a warmth that is sorely lacking in the other rooms of this house. I'm 73 years old, and over the years I've cooked thousands of dinners. First for my parents, then for my husband and little Christopher, then just for my husband when my son left for school. After my husband died, I thought that chapter of my life was over, but here I am, back at the stove, chopping onions and making sure the meat doesn't burn. Only now I'm not cooking for my family, but for my son's family, where I feel unwelcome. I'm chopping parsley to serve when I hear the familiar sound of the front door opening. Sarah has returned from work. Her heels tap a sharp rhythm on the parquet in the hallway. Then the sound becomes muffled. She's made her way to the living room, where she's turned on the TV. Loud as always. No hello or how are you? Nothing. Just the sound of heels and the hum of the TV. It's like I'm not even here. 3 years ago, when I first moved in after my husband died, Sarah was still trying to be nice. She'd asked if I needed help in the kitchen, inquired about my well-being, even bought me magazines when I was in the hospital with pneumonia. But even then, her voice was strained, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. Christopher had said she just needed time to get used to the new situation. Time passed, and the adjustment didn't happen. On the contrary, every month the attitude grew colder and colder, and her attempts to be polite disappeared one by one. I stir the meat with a wooden spatula, the same one I'd used at home for over 30 years, one of the few things I took with me when I moved. The rest had to be sold with the house. Christopher had convinced me it was better this way, that I didn't need the big space, that the house was too hard to take care of at my age. Perhaps he was right, but sometimes I miss my morning cups of coffee on the veranda, the sounds of my garden, the feeling that I am where I am supposed to be. I listen to the sounds of the house. Christopher isn't back yet. His car isn't in the driveway. I saw out the window about 10 minutes ago. He works for an insurance company as a regional manager and is often late, especially in the last 6 months when the company started downsizing. He used to call and let me know if he was going to be late for dinner. My husband and I taught him that as a kid. Always let him know where you are and when you plan to be back. A simple show of respect for those who are waiting for you. Now he just shows up when he comes, and I heat up his food in the microwave, trying not to show disappointment. A knock on the back door interrupts my musings. It can only be Jennifer. She's the only one using the back door, which leads directly into the kitchen through the small porch. I wipe my hands with a towel and open the door. My neighbor stands on the doorstep with her characteristic friendly smile and a small enamel pot in her hands. She's wearing a light spring coat and comfortable low-heeled shoes. Jennifer always dresses practical but tasteful. Vivian, honey, I made too much soup, Jennifer says, holding out a bowl to me. Chicken noodle soup. I thought you might need it for tomorrow. Jennifer Coleman has lived in the two-story house across the street for 20 years and knows all the neighbors by name. She's 68, but she looks younger than her years. Always neatly trimmed, hair nicely styled, light makeup on her face. She has 3 grown children who regularly visit her every weekend and 7 grandchildren whose pictures she carries in her purse and enjoys showing to anyone who wants to see them. Her husband died 5 years ago of a heart attack, but she has not become depressed like many widows, but instead has become even more active, signing up for a gardening club, volunteering at the library, and organizing flea markets for the local church. Thank you, Jenny. That's very sweet of you, I said, taking the pot and feeling the warmth of it. Come on in, the coffee's still hot. I just brewed a new batch. Oh, I don't want to interrupt. She glances over my shoulder into the kitchen, and I see her gaze rest on the pan of meat, then slide to the neatly arranged vegetables on the cutting board. Making dinner? It smells divine, as always. You have an amazing talent for turning simple foods into something special. Nothing special, just beef stew with potatoes and carrots, I reply, but her words warm my soul. Christopher loves simple, homemade food. It was his favorite dish as a child, especially when I added a little thyme and bay leaf. Jennifer nods, and I notice her gaze become thoughtful for a moment. In her eyes, I read something like understanding and sympathy. She's never said anything direct about our family's situation, but I know she sees and hears everything. She has a special talent for noticing things that others would rather ignore, and yet never prying with unsolicited advice. Perhaps it's the result of years of experience raising her own children and observing the lives of her neighbors. How is Sarah doing? She asks cautiously, and there is no curiosity or gloating in her tone, only genuine interest. She just got home from work. Tired, I guess. I answer in a neutral tone, even though we both know it's not just about tiredness. We both know there's more to it than that, but we don't need to say it out loud. From the living room comes a loud, artificial laugh from some television show, a sound so harsh that it drowns out our quiet conversation. Jennifer wrinkles her nose slightly. She's always been a stickler for moderate volume and good manners. Well, I won't keep you from cooking, she says, adjusting her purse on her shoulder and heading for the door. If you need anything, you know where to find me. I'm usually home in the evenings, reading or working in the garden while it's light. Thank you, Jenny. Thanks for the soup, too. I'll eat your chicken soup for lunch tomorrow and think of you with gratitude. After Jennifer leaves, I put her soup in the refrigerator, carefully placing the pot between a jar of pickles and a container of last night's leftover salad. I return to the stove and check the readiness of the dish. The meat is almost done, soft, flavorful, with a golden crust. The potatoes have also reached the right consistency. I turn down the heat under both pans and cover them with lids to keep the food hot, but not too dry. The house is relatively quiet again, except for the TV in the living room, which is running at such a volume that the neighbors can probably hear every word. I think back to a time when evenings in our house were filled with very different sounds. Quiet conversations, the rustling of newspapers, the melodic ticking of the antique clock in the living room. My husband loved classical music, and we often listened to radio plays or concerts in the evenings. Christopher did his homework at the kitchen table, and I helped him with his math while I made dinner. I wash my hands with warm water and lavender soap, another small luxury I allow myself, buying this soap from a little shop in downtown Seigneurie. I walk over to the window above the sink and look out onto the street. From here, I have a good view of the driveway and part of Elm Street with its rows of neat houses. The neighbors' houses are lush with greenery. It's an early spring this year, and the trees are already covered with young, bright green foliage. The apple trees have bloomed a week earlier than usual, and their soft pink petals carpet the sidewalks. Jennifer's house has soft yellow lights in the first floor windows, and it makes her feel warm and at home. I can see her silhouette in the kitchen window. She's apparently washing dishes after dinner. In other houses on the street, too, the windows are lit up. People are preparing a late dinner, gathering around the table as a family, helping their children with their homework, sharing the news of the past day. A simple, ordinary life, which seems to me now an unattainable luxury. It used to be like that for us, too. When Christopher was little, he always looked forward to his father coming home from work. He'd press his nose against the living room window and look for the familiar car. The three of us would sit down at the table at 7:30 in the evening, and my husband would talk about his business at the office, and Christopher would talk excitedly about school news, who had gotten an A in math, who had fallen in gym class, what book he had been assigned to read in literature class. After dinner, we often played board games such as Monopoly, chess, or puzzles. And on weekends, we watched family movies. Simple pleasures that seemed so natural and ordinary then, but now seem like incredible luxuries from a past life. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway distracts me from my memories. It's Christopher. His dark blue sedan slowly turns from the street and stops next to Serena's white car. I glance at the kitchen clock. It's almost 8:30. Not too late for him lately, but dinner has been ready for a while and has gotten a little cold despite the lids. I hear the car door slam, then the jingle of keys in the front door lock. Familiar footsteps in the hallway. Christopher is saying hello to Sarah. Their voices come from the living room, but the distance and the noise of the TV make it hard to make out the words. The conversation is short and restrained, and soon I hear heavy footsteps on the stairs as he goes upstairs to change out of his work suit and into house clothes. While Christopher is upstairs, I pull some nice china plates from the cupboard, the same ones I got from my mother-in-law almost 40 years ago. They're decorated with a small floral pattern and have a thin gold border that's a little worn from time, but still gives them elegance. I carefully arrange the cutlery. Forks on the left, knives on the right, all parallel to each other. I place the cloth napkins in the silver rings my husband gave me for our 10th wedding anniversary. I light 2 candles in a candelabra, not for romance, just because the soft light makes any meal more pleasant and solemn. I try to make everything beautiful and cozy, although I realize that no one will notice or appreciate these details. Sarah would obviously prefer to eat in front of the TV, holding a plate on her lap, and Christopher would just silently eat whatever they put on his plate without paying attention to the setting. But I'm used to family dinners at a beautifully set table, and I'm not going to give up that tradition, even if no one else wants it. It's one of the few things that still ties me to my old life, when home was home and family was family. Christopher comes down 15 minutes later, already changed into worn jeans and a soft plaid shirt. He walks into the kitchen and smiles at me, the duty smile he's learned to wear as a protective mask in recent years. The smile that's supposed to show that everything is okay, even when it's not. "Mom, how are you? How was your day?" he asks, and there's genuine concern in his voice, but I feel a little rushed, like he's in a hurry to get out of this conversation and on to something more important. "It's okay, honey," I answer, taking the lids off the pans. "I had a routine checkup at the doctor's office, then stopped by the grocery store. Dinner is ready if you're hungry. Your favorite beef stew." "Great." Christopher nods, his face relaxing slightly at the mention of his favorite dish. "Sarah, Mom made dinner." There's a vague sound from the living room, something between a sigh and a cough, but the TV stays on. I carry the dishes into the dining room, where the candles already burn with a steady, calm flame, casting soft shadows on the walls. Christopher takes the potato dish and follows me silently. The dining room smells of wax and the faint scent of old wood. This table Sarah inherited from her grandmother, and it's one of the few things in the house I actually like. "It smells wonderful, Mom," Christopher said, setting the dish on the stand so as not to damage the polished surface of the table. "Just like when I was a kid." "It's the same recipe," I said, setting up the serving utensils. "Remember how you always asked for this exact dish for your birthday?" "Of course I do." He smiles, and for a moment his face softens, as if he's actually transported back to those old days. "And you also always made a special gravy with mushrooms." "I have some today too," I say, and I feel something warm spill into my chest from this simple moment of intimacy with my son. Sarah appears in the dining room doorway with obvious reluctance. She hasn't changed after work, still in her black suit and white blouse, her hair still in a tight bun. Her makeup is slightly smudged under her eyes, betraying fatigue, but there's a certain inner tension in her posture, as if she's always on the defensive. Good evening, Sarah, I say, hoping to hear at least a formal response. She nods in my direction, but the movement is so subtle that it could be mistaken for casual. She sits down in her usual spot across from Christopher, her back to the window that overlooks the backyard, with its neatly trimmed bushes and small gazebo. I take a seat at the head of the table, not because I consider myself the head of the family, but because it's the best place to serve the food and make sure everyone has enough on their plates. I start laying out the dinner. The movements are familiar and practiced over decades of family meals. First, the potatoes, 3 medium-sized tubers each, then a piece of meat, drizzled with a flavorful dark gravy with onions and herbs. I add some stewed carrots, which have taken on a beautiful golden hue and a sweet caramel flavor. Christopher thanks me with a warm look and a nod. Sarah silently picks up her fork and starts eating without waiting for the others. How was your day at work? I turn to Christopher, trying to strike up a conversation that might bring us together, at least for the duration of dinner. The usual, he replies, cutting off a piece of meat. Lots of paperwork, a couple of client meetings, nothing special. He chews slowly, thoughtfully, and I can tell his thoughts are somewhere far away. How are you? What did you do today? I had a routine checkup with Dr. Miller, I say, cutting my piece of meat into neat little portions. All my vitals are normal. My blood pressure's good. Then I went to Fresh Mart to buy groceries for the week. I met Mrs. Henderson, remember her? She was your third-grade teacher. Yes, of course I remember, Christopher said, brightening up. How is she doing? Not bad for her 80s, still driving and tending to her garden. She asked about you, said to say hello, says you were one of her favorite students. Christopher smiles genuinely, and I see the tension in his face recede a little. Sarah continues to eat in silence, occasionally glancing at her phone, which is lying next to her plate, screen up. Notifications occasionally light up the screen, but she doesn't react to them, though I notice her gaze involuntarily sliding that way. How are things going at work, Sarah? I ask, sincerely trying to engage my sister-in-law in conversation. Christopher said you're going through a busy period. Sarah raises her eyes from her plate and looks at me with an expression that's hard to interpret. There's something cold, almost irritated in her gaze, as if my question has violated some invisible boundary. Yes, tense, she answers briefly, not adding details. Very tense. There's an awkward pause. I try to find words to continue the conversation without seeming intrusive. It's completely dark outside the window, and the glass reflects our little family scene, 3 people at a candlelit dinner, but without the warmth and intimacy usually associated with such moments. The meat was very tender, Christopher said, clearly trying to lighten the atmosphere. Did you add anything new? No, it's the same as usual, I said. I just braised it longer than usual, on a low heat. The secret is to take your time. Good meat takes time and patience. Some people spend too much time in the kitchen, Sarah says softly, but clearly enough for all of us to hear her. She doesn't look at anyone, continuing to eat as if she were talking to herself. Christopher stops with his fork halfway to his mouth. I feel something clench in my chest, but I try to stay calm. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it was just fatigue, and the words sounded harsher than intended. I love to cook, I say softly. It brings me pleasure, especially when I'm cooking for my family. Mmm, Sarah nods, but there's no approval or gratitude in that sound. Not everyone likes too much salt in their food, though. Some people need to watch it. I blink, not immediately understanding what she's getting at. There's really enough salt in the meat I added to taste, like I always have, and no one has ever complained. My husband loved my cooking precisely because it was moderately salty, moderately spicy, balanced. I think there's just enough salt, Christopher said cautiously. glancing at me and my wife. It's the same as always. Yeah, you're used to it, Sarah said, and there was a faint but distinct note of irritation in her voice. But doctors say that taste buds dull with age. Older people often oversalt their food without realizing it. The last words hang in the air like a cold fog. I look down at my plate and feel my cheeks begin to burn. Not from shame, but from resentment and bewilderment. The food is properly salted, I'm sure of it. But it's not even about the salt. It's the way Sarah said it, the way she called me elderly, as if it were a diagnosis or a judgment. Why don't you get some water? Christopher suggests to his wife, and I can hear the slight concern in his voice. No thanks, Sarah replies. Just an observation. I read an article recently about how nutritional needs change with age. Very informative. She says it like she's sharing useful scientific information, but I can sense the subtext. She's not talking about nutrition. She's talking about the fact that I'm old, that my abilities are fading, that I can no longer do the things I used to do. And she does it so subtly that it's hard to object without looking like a resentful old woman. Christopher awkwardly clears his throat and goes back to eating. I can see the muscles in his jaw working, the way he carefully avoids eye contact with me. Once upon a time, he would have stood up for me. Once upon a time, he would have said something like, Sarah, Mom's cooking was always wonderful. But now he just chews his meat and stares at his plate. By the way, Sarah continues, setting her fork aside and looking directly at me for the first time all night, my friend Haley called yesterday. Her mother-in-law just moved into a wonderful nursing home in Des Moines. She says the facilities there are amazing. Their own kitchen, medical staff around the clock, various activities for the residents, and most importantly, complete independence. No one has to cook for each other or worry about whether the food is appropriate. That last sentence sounds like a punch in the gut. I put my fork down on my plate because I suddenly lose my appetite. Sarah looks at me with an expression of innocent interest, as if she's just shared an interesting piece of news from the lives of people she knows. But we all realize what she's really talking about. Sounds interesting, I say, trying to keep my tone even. But I'm not ready for that kind of change yet. Sure, sure. Sarah nods with an understanding smile. I just thought the information might be useful in the future when the time comes to make those decisions. Christopher lifts his eyes from his plate and glances quickly from me to his wife, then back again. I can see the internal struggle in his face. A part of him realizes that what's happening is wrong, but another part of him doesn't want to confront his wife. He chooses silence, and that silence says more than any words. Haley says her mother-in-law is very pleased, Sarah continues, returning to her food. There's a library, a garden, even a small movie theater, and most importantly, no one feels like a burden to the younger generation. The word burden cuts like a knife. I clench my napkin in my fist under the table and stare at the candles, which continue to burn with an even, calm light, unaware of the drama unfolding in their soft glow. The wax drips slowly down the candlesticks, forming intricate patterns. I think, I say quietly but clearly, that as long as I'm able to take care of myself and even help my family, it's too soon to talk about nursing homes. Oh, sure, Sarah agrees with the same innocent smile. No one is talking about urgency. It's just good to be informed about the possibilities. Planning is a sign of wisdom, isn't it? She masterfully turns the situation around, presenting her hints as a show of care and foresight. Christopher nods, as if agreeing with the reasonableness of that approach, and I realize I'm losing this game. No matter what I say in my defense, it will come off as the stubbornness of an old man who won't face facts. The rest of dinner passes in relative silence. Sarah has finished eating first and is now browsing through something on her phone, occasionally laughing quietly at a meme or message. Christopher methodically finishes his portion, complimenting the food, but it sounds strained, like he's performing an unpleasant duty. I eat mechanically, almost missing the taste of the very beef stew I cooked so lovingly just an hour ago. When we finish, Sarah is the first to get up from the table. "Thank you for dinner," she says, and even these words of gratitude sound like a formality. "I'm going upstairs. I have some more work to do on the computer." She leaves without offering to help clear the table or wash the dishes. Christopher stays for a few more minutes, finishes his water from his glass, and smiles awkwardly at me. "Mom, dinner really was great," he says, and this time I can hear the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you." He gets up, walks over to me, and gives me a quick kiss on the cheek, a gesture that was once natural, but now feels like an apology for not being able or willing to change the situation. Then he goes upstairs, too, leaving me alone with plates, burning candles, and a heavy residue on my soul. I sit in the empty dining room and stare at the remains of dinner, at the uneaten pieces of meat, at the gravy, at the napkins that were never used for their intended purpose. The candles are almost burned out, their flames smaller and more insecure. Soon they will go out, and only the cold electric light from the chandelier will remain in the dining room. Through the window, you can see Jennifer's house lights go out in the kitchen and come on in the living room. She's probably settled in her favorite chair with a book or knitting. Her house is warm and quiet now, where no one is called a burden or hinted at nursing homes. There lives a woman who has managed to maintain her dignity and independence and surround herself with people who respect and appreciate her. I blow out the candles and start collecting plates. Tomorrow, everything will happen again. I'll make breakfast, clean the house, go to the store, make dinner, and in the evening, I'll set the table again for the family who thinks I'm superfluous. And the day after tomorrow, too, and the week after that, until one of us finally runs out of patience. The next few days go the same way. Polite formalities, strained smiles, and barely contained irritation that hangs in the air like an invisible fog. I try to stay out of the way, not to impose, to do my business quietly and discreetly. I get up early, cook breakfast, clean the house, go to the store. I behave like an exemplary tenant who pays for her accommodation with household help and tries not to be inconvenienced. Thursday night, the situation reaches a new level of tension. I'm doing laundry in the small laundry room next to the kitchen when I hear voices coming from the living room. Sarah is on the phone with a friend, and although I'm not intentionally eavesdropping, the thin walls of the house make the conversation quite audible. "No, it's just unbearable," Sarah says, the usual irritation in her voice. She pokes her nose into everything. Yesterday, she rearranged the jars in the cupboard, and the day before yesterday, she reorganized my cookbooks. It's like I can't get my own house in order. I freeze with a wet towel in my hands. I did rearrange the jars in the cupboard. I just wanted to help, to make the food stand logically, in size and purpose, and the cookbooks were scattered all over the kitchen, so I gathered them in one place, on a shelf. I thought I was doing a good deed. "Yeah, I know she's trying to help," Sarah continues after a pause. "But this is my home, my space. I didn't ask her to meddle in everything." And Christopher doesn't understand why it pisses me off. He says, "Mom just wants to be helpful, helpful, like I'm not doing enough on my own." There's so much bitterness and anger in her words that my heart sinks. I close the washing machine door carefully and walk quietly out of the laundry room, trying not to creak the floorboards. I go up to my room and close the door. I sit on the edge of my bed and stare out the window at the dark street. So, this is what she thinks of my attempts to help: interference, poking her nose in, not doing it on her own. Every move I make, every desire to do something useful, is seen as a criticism of her ability to run the household, as an infringement on her territory. Maybe she's right. Maybe I do take on too much at someone else's house, but what am I supposed to do? Sit in my room and stare at the ceiling? Pretend I don't see dust on the shelves or clutter in the closets? I'm used to taking care of the house. It's part of me, part of who I've been all my life. The next day at breakfast, the atmosphere is even more strained. I make an omelet with herbs, a simple dish that Christopher has always loved. I put on the table orange juice, buttered toast, and strawberry jam that I made back in the summer. I try to make it pretty, but not too formal. Christopher comes down first, already dressed for work in a dark blue suit and red tie. He looks tired, dark circles under his eyes, his movements slightly sluggish. He's been working late and getting up early a lot in recent weeks, the stress of possible layoffs at the company taking its toll. "Good morning, Mom," he says, sitting down at the table and nodding appreciatively at the plate of omelets. "It looks delicious." "Good morning, darling. How did you sleep?" "Fine," he replies, but I can tell he didn't. "Thanks for breakfast." Sarah appears a few minutes later in an elegant gray suit and white blouse. Her hair is styled in a severe bun. Her makeup is flawless, but her face is cold and detached. She sits down without saying hello and silently pours herself coffee from a thermos. "The omelet is wonderful," Christopher says, trying to lighten the atmosphere. "Just like when I was a kid." "It's the same recipe," I said, smiling. "Remember when you asked me to teach you how to make an omelet when you were about 10? "You bet." Christopher laughs, his face softening for a moment. "I was sure it was the hardest dish in the world. It was always scrambled eggs." "You can do it now," I say, savoring this rare moment of intimacy with my son. Sarah looks up from her phone, where she was watching the morning news, and stares at us with an expression that's hard to interpret. There's something prickly, irritated in her gaze. "Christopher, have you forgotten that we're having dinner with Mark and Linda tonight?" she says, interrupting our reminiscing. "No, of course I haven't forgotten," Christopher replies, but I can see the slight confusion in his eyes. Perhaps he really has forgotten. 7:30 at that new Italian restaurant, right? 8, Sarah corrects him with barely perceptible irritation. "I told you yesterday, twice." There's an awkward pause. Christopher nods apologetically and returns to his omelet. I realize it's better to keep quiet, to stay out of their conversation, but at the same time, I feel a pang of resentment. I wasn't even informed of their plans, let alone asked if I wanted to join. "Vivian," Sarah says to me, and there's an emphasized politeness in her voice that's worse than outright rudeness. "I noticed you were rearranging things in the bathroom again yesterday." I blink, trying to remember what exactly I was doing in the bathroom. "Oh yeah, put the shampoo and gel bottles in order of size, wipe down the shelves, and replace the old soap with new soap." It looked like a mess to me. "I was just cleaning up a little," I say gently. "I wanted to help." "I understand your intentions." Sarah nods, but there's no understanding in her tone. "But you see, I have my own system for organizing things. When someone rearranges them, I have to find everything I need all over again. It's an inconvenience." "I'm sorry, I didn't think of that," I replied, feeling myself blush. "I won't touch your stuff again." "It's not just the bathroom," Sarah continues, setting her coffee cup aside. "Last week you rearranged the pots and pans in the kitchen cabinet. The day before yesterday, you put my mail in some kind of folder. Yesterday you reorganized the bookshelf in the living room. I realize you're used to being the boss of the house, but I'm the boss." The last words sound like a slap in the face. Christopher stops chewing and glances back and forth at his wife and me, clearly unsure of what to say. I can see the inner struggle on his face. He realizes that Sarah has overstepped her bounds, but he doesn't dare pull her back. "Sarah," he says gently, "Mom was just trying to help. She didn't mean anything wrong." I know she didn't mean anything wrong. Sarah replies, and now there's outright irritation in her voice. But intentions and results are different things. The result is that I feel uncomfortable in my own home. She talks about me in the third person, like I'm not in the room, like I'm some object of discussion rather than a living person sitting next to me at the same table. It's humiliating and painful, but I don't know how to respond without making the situation worse. Perhaps we should divide up the responsibilities more clearly, Christopher suggests diplomatically, so that there are no misunderstandings. That's an excellent idea, Sarah agrees. Vivian, I'd appreciate it if you'd focus on your things and your space. Kitchen, bathroom, living room. I prefer to clean myself. It's better for everyone. By her space, she means my room upstairs and maybe the tiny bathroom next to it. In effect, she's banishing me from the common areas of the house, leaving only the essentials. I look at Christopher, hoping to see support, but he avoids my gaze. Okay, I say quietly. I get it. Great. Sarah smiles, but it's a smile as cold as ice. I knew we'd find a compromise. Now everyone knows their limits. The rest of breakfast passes in complete silence. Christopher finishes his omelet without lifting his eyes from his plate, Sarah browsing through something on her phone. I sit with my food untouched and try to swallow the lump in my throat. When they leave for work, I'm left alone with dirty plates and a bitter residue in my soul. I clear the table mechanically, wash the dishes, and set them to dry. I go into the living room and sit down in a chair by the window that overlooks the street. On the opposite side, Jennifer is watering the flowers in the front garden. She waves at me, spotting me through the window, and I wave back, trying to smile. I look at this house that was supposed to be my home, but never was. The furniture that I didn't choose, the walls painted in colors I don't like, the pictures that I appear in less and less often. I don't belong here, and now it's official. I've been assigned a place upstairs, away from family life, away from what really matters in this house. I think of Christopher as a little boy. He was such a kind boy, always ready to protect the weak, to help someone in trouble. When a kid was teased at school, Christopher would stand up for him, even if it got him in trouble. He brought home stray kittens, fed birds in winter, shared lunch with classmates who forgot their breakfast money. I remember him coming home one day, at the age of 12, with a black eye. It turned out that he had gotten into a fight with an older boy who was hurting a girl from the junior class. My husband wanted to scold him for fighting, but I stood up for him. I told him that a man's pride is sometimes more important than rules of behavior. Christopher hugged me so tight and said he would always protect the ones he loved. Where is that boy now? What happened to the Christopher who was willing to fight for justice? When did he learn to be silent when he sees his own mother being hurt? Maybe Sarah's right, and family is more important than anything else. Maybe he just chose his priorities, and in that choice, I came second. Or maybe life has taught him that some battles aren't worth the effort, that sometimes it's easier to agree and live in peace than to stand up for principles and ruin relationships. Maybe he's just tired of conflict and wants quiet in his own home, but that doesn't make it any easier. From understanding does not disappear the pain of the fact that the man you raised, educated, loved with all your heart now stands aside and is silent when you are humiliated, that he chose comfort over justice, convenience over loyalty. At 11:30, the phone rings. It's Jennifer. Vivian, darling, would you like to take a walk downtown? She asks. I want to check out the new antique store that opened on Main Street. I hear they have some interesting things there. I'd love to, I answer, suddenly realizing that I really need to get out of this house. Just give me 10 minutes to pack. Great. I'll meet you in my backyard. I change into a nice dress, put on a little makeup, and go outside. The day is sunny and warm, the spring air full of the scent of blossoming trees. Jennifer is waiting for me in a light cardigan and comfortable shoes, with a small purse over her shoulder. "How are you doing, dear?" she asks as we walk slowly toward the center of town. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine," I answer, but my voice sounds unconvincing, even to myself. Jennifer looks at me carefully, and I realize she doesn't believe me, but she doesn't insist, for which I'm grateful. We walk in silence, enjoying the sunshine and the fresh air, and gradually the heaviness in my soul recedes a little. "You know," Jennifer says as we turn onto Main Street, "sometimes it's good to do things for yourself, not for your family, not for your home, but for yourself. Something that makes you feel good about yourself." I nod, realizing there's more wisdom in her words than meets the eye. Maybe it's time to think about what's really important to me, not just how to make others happy. Perhaps it's time to remember who I was before I became someone's wife, mother, mother-in-law. A walk with Jennifer turns out to be just what I needed. We spend almost 3 hours in the city. We stop by an antique store where I buy a small porcelain bird statue that reminds me of the ones in our old house. Then we have coffee at a cozy cafe on the corner of First and Main Street, discussing the books we're reading, sharing memories of our childhood. Jennifer tells funny stories about her grandchildren, and I laugh heartily for the first time in a long time. When I get home at 3:30, the house is empty and quiet. I place the statue on the dresser in my room and admire it for a few minutes. A little tit with its wings spread, ready to take flight. Something about it reminds me of freedom, of a time when I could make my own decisions without looking at other people's opinions. The day passes quietly. I read in my room, sorting through the old letters I keep in my jewelry box. Letters from my husband written on business trips, postcards from friends, notes from little Christopher with drawings, and the crookedly written words, "Love, Mommy." These pieces of paper are evidence of a time when someone truly needed and cared for me. By evening, I prepare a simple dinner: fried chicken and vegetables. I try not to interfere with Serena's system of organization, use only the essentials, and carefully wash every used item behind me. I set the dining room table, but no candles, no special solemnity, just food for the family. Sarah and Christopher return almost simultaneously at 7:30. They both look tired. Christopher's face is rumpled, his tie loose, his hair disheveled. Sarah keeps a straight face, but I notice the tension in her shoulders, the tiredness in her eyes. It must have been a really hard day for both of them. "Dinner's ready," I say as they pass through the kitchen. "Nothing fancy, just chicken." Christopher nods gratefully, and Sarah silently heads upstairs to change. 20 minutes later, we're gathered around the table. It's relatively quiet at first, as we pass the dishes, set the food down, exchange duty phrases about the weather and weekend plans. I try to be inconspicuous, not to ask unnecessary questions, not to offer help where it is not needed. "The chicken was delicious," Christopher says, and I can hear the sincere gratitude in his voice. "Thank you, Mom." "You're welcome," I answer quietly, not wanting to draw attention to myself. Sarah eats in silence, glancing at her phone every now and then. Her face expresses its usual detachment, but there's something else about her today. Some inner tension, a readiness for conflict. Maybe she had a particularly bad day at work. Maybe something happened with coworkers or superiors. "How was your day?" Christopher asks his wife cautiously. "Disgusting," Sarah replies, not lifting her eyes from her plate. "Just disgusting." The new manager has decided to review all our projects, criticizing the work we've been doing for months. He acts like we're all incompetent idiots. "I'm sorry," Christopher says sympathetically. "Maybe things will get better once he's settled in." "I doubt it," Sarah snorted. "Some people just don't know how to appreciate other people's work. They always think they know better, even though they have no idea about the specifics of the process. There's such bitterness in her words that I can't help but sympathize. I know what it's like when your efforts are not appreciated, when someone criticizes what you put your heart into. But at the same time, I realize that there may be a hidden subtext in her words, a hint about my situation at home. Maybe we should talk to him directly, I suggest cautiously. Explain how things work, why you do things the way you do. Sarah raises her eyes and looks at me with an expression as if I've said something incredibly stupid. Vivian, she says slowly, and there's a familiar coldness in her voice. You do realize that the modern office isn't the kind of place where you can just walk up and explain to your bosses how to do their job, right? I was just thinking, I start, but she interrupts me. Yes, you were thinking, and that's exactly the problem. You're always thinking about how other people can better organize their lives, how we can work better, how we can cook better, how we can clean the house better. But maybe you should think about the fact that your advice isn't always appropriate. The air in the dining room becomes thick with tension. Christopher stops eating and glances back and forth at his wife and me, clearly unsure of how to respond. I can feel the color flooding over my face. I didn't mean to, I begin, but I realize that any words will only make things worse. Of course you didn't want to, Sarah continues, and now her voice is blatantly aggressive. You never want anything. You just want to help, right? Help me move my stuff. Help me organize my kitchen. Help me with advice about my work. But you know what? I don't need your help. Sarah, Christopher says quietly, maybe you shouldn't. Don't what? She turns sharply to her husband. Shouldn't tell the truth? Should I not finally say what I've been thinking for months? I'm tired of pretending everything's okay, Christopher. I'm tired of pretending I like living under constant scrutiny and criticism. I'm not controlling anyone, I say quietly, trying to stay calm. And I'm not criticizing. I was just trying to what? Sarah stands up from the table, and I can see that she's shaking with anger. Trying to show me how to live in my own house? Like I'm a little kid who can't manage without your guidance. Sarah, calm down, Christopher pleads, but his voice sounds unsure. I'm not going to calm down, she shouts, her voice echoing off the walls of the dining room. I can't take it anymore. Every day it's the same thing. She's meddling everywhere, fixing everything, redoing everything. It's like we can't get through the day without her interference. She turns to me, and in her eyes I see such hatred that my heart skips a beat. Do you want to know the truth, Vivian? Your food is bland and tasteless, just like yourself. You're an old, annoying woman who doesn't realize her time has passed. No one wants your advice. No one wants your help. No one wants you. Get out of here, old woman. Get out of my house and out of my life. The words hit like slaps. I sit still, feeling something inside me tear and crumble. Bland and tasteless, old and annoying. No one wants me. Words that hurt more than any physical blow because they contain a fraction of what I myself sometimes think of myself in moments of despair. I look at Christopher, hoping to see indignation, a willingness to defend my mother, but instead I see confusion and a smile, an awkward, guilty smile, but a smile nonetheless. The smile of a man who doesn't know what to do and chooses the easiest way to pretend that nothing terrible has happened. Mom, he finally says, his voice shaking, Sarah's just tired. Tough day at work, you realize. He doesn't condemn his wife for calling his mother an old woman. He doesn't resent her for yelling at the woman who raised him. Instead, he excuses her, finds reasons for her behavior. And that smile, that awful, apologetic smile, tells me more than any words could. My son has chosen a side. And it's not my side. I get up from the table slowly, trying not to show how my hands are shaking. I fold my napkin carefully next to my plate, as if it's important, as if good manners can make a difference. Sarah stands, breathing heavily, her face red with anger. Christopher looks down at his plate, still with the same awkward smile. I'm sorry, I say quietly, though I don't know what I'm apologizing for. For trying to help, for wanting to be a part of their family, for preventing them from living the life they want. I walk out of the cafeteria without turning around. I walk up the stairs slowly, holding onto the banister because my legs are shaking. I go into my room, close the door, and sit on the edge of my bed. There are muffled voices coming from downstairs. Sarah and Christopher are talking about something, but I can't make out the words. He's probably reassuring her, telling her everything's gonna be okay. She's probably apologizing for the outburst, but not for the words, for not holding back, not for telling the truth. I sit in the dark and stare at the statue of a bluebird on the dresser. Even in the twilight, I can see its wings spread, ready to fly. I am reminded of Jennifer's words that sometimes it's good to do something for yourself, something that brings joy to me personally, not to others. Outside the window, it's finally dark. The first floor is silent. They've probably gone to bed or are sitting in front of the TV, trying to forget what happened. And I sit in my room and realize that something has changed forever. Something is broken and can't be fixed. I lie on my bed without undressing and stare at the ceiling. Serena's words spin in my head. No one needs your advice. No one needs your help. No one needs you. Maybe she's right. Maybe it really is time to accept that fact and stop clinging to illusions. But if no one needs me, then I don't need anyone. If my help isn't appreciated, why should I waste my time, my energy, my care on them? And if so, why should I spend my money on them? I get out of bed and walk over to the closet. I take out a small box from the far corner where I keep important documents, bank statements, my husband's will, the certificate of title for the house I sold. And one more thing, the paperwork for a secret account that no one knows about. When my husband died, I sold our house and most of our possessions. I told Christopher I had enough money to live modestly, and he believed me. But I didn't tell him about the money my husband had invested in stocks and bonds, the savings he had made over decades, about the amount that would allow me to live independently for many more years. I kept that money as a safety cushion, as a guarantee that I would never become a burden on the family. I'd planned to spend it on my own medical care if I needed it, or leave it as an inheritance for my grandchildren when they came along. But now, sitting in the dark room and remembering Sarah's words, I think about how that money might have a better purpose. If the family thinks I'm superfluous, if my help isn't needed, if I'm just a hindrance to their lives, why not put those funds where they can really do some good, where they will be appreciated not for the size of the sum, but for the good they can do? I open my jewelry box and pull out the latest bank statement. The numbers on the paper seem unreal, the result of a lifetime of saving and smart investments. It's enough money to help a lot of kids, to give them something they never had, a chance at a normal life. I put the papers back and lie down on the bed. I feel strange, heavy and light at the same time. Heavy with the realization that my family doesn't want me anymore, but it's light knowing that I have a choice, that I don't have to suffer humiliation and live where I'm not wanted. Tomorrow morning I'll go to the bank. I will do what I should have done a long time ago. I will take care of those who really need help and care. Children who have no family, no home, no one to protect them. And maybe for the first time in a long time, I will feel needed and useful. I wake up at 7:30 in the morning, even though my alarm clock is set for 8. All night I slept intermittently. I woke up from every rustle in the house. then lay with my eyes open for a long time, thinking over the decision I had made. But during these sleepless hours, the doubts did not come. On the contrary, every minute I am more and more convinced of the correctness of my choice. I get out of bed, take a shower in the small bathroom next to the bedroom. I dress in my best suit, the dark blue one I bought with my husband for special occasions. Today is definitely a special occasion, though not one he and I could have foreseen. I'm styling my hair, coloring lightly but carefully. I want to look dignified when I sign the papers. I get down to the first floor at 8:30. In the kitchen, I make myself coffee and toast, a simple breakfast that doesn't take too long and doesn't make too much noise. I eat in silence, looking out the window at the waking street. Jennifer is already watering the flowers in her front garden. She's always been an early bird. It's an ordinary morning in an ordinary neighborhood, but it will be a turning point for me. At 8 in the morning, I hear footsteps on the stairs. Christopher is coming down for breakfast. I meet his gaze as he walks into the kitchen. His face is guilty, tired, like he didn't sleep well either. He avoids direct eye contact, but I can tell he wants to say something. Mom, he begins carefully, pouring himself a cup of coffee. About yesterday, Sarah apologizes. She was very tired, snapped. You know how it is after a hard day. I nod, not trusting my voice. I wonder if Sarah asked me to deliver the apology herself or if it was Christopher's initiative. Most likely the latter. Sarah hardly thinks she has anything to apologize for. We all say things we don't mean sometimes, he continues, and I can hear the desire in his voice to smooth things over, to put things back the way they were. The important thing is that everything in the family should stay in the family, right? Of course, I answer calmly. It's okay, Christopher, don't worry. He looks at me in surprise, clearly expecting a more emotional reaction. Perhaps tears, resentment, demands for an explanation. But my calmness seems suspicious to him. Are you sure you're not angry? He asks again. I'm not, I answer honestly. Sarah was right about a lot of things. Perhaps I do interfere too much in your life. Christopher looks even more puzzled. He expected me to have to comfort him, to reassure him that I've forgiven everything. But I'm not going to do that. Last night cleared up a lot of things, and now I see the situation in a whole new way. I have some business in the city today, I said, finishing my coffee. I'll be back for lunch. What kind of errands? He asks, and I can hear the worry in his voice. Maybe he's afraid I've gone looking for a place of my own. Bank matters, I answer vaguely. Nothing important. He nods with relief. Bank questions sound routine and safe. He finishes his coffee, has a quick breakfast of toast, and leaves for work, still looking a little worried, but not so guilty. At 9 in the morning, I leave the house. The bank opens at 10:30, but I want to walk, get some fresh air, think through the details again. It's about a 30-minute leisurely walk to the city center, just what I need to gather my thoughts. I walk down the familiar streets of Sigourney, past houses I've lived in for years. There's the Anderson family home, with its famous apple tree, which is laden with pink flowers every spring. There's the little library where I sometimes borrowed books. Here's the cafe where Jennifer and I had coffee yesterday. All of this has become a part of my life, but not so important a part that it keeps me here against my will. First National Bank is located downtown, in an old brick building with tall windows and massive columns. I've had service here for many years, dating back to the days when my husband and I first moved to Sigourney. I know all the staff by sight, they know me. That'll make it easy. Mrs. Parker, the branch manager, greets me with her usual professional smile. An elegant woman in her 50s, with a short haircut and a strict suit, she has always given the impression of someone who knows how to solve problems quickly and efficiently. Good morning, Mrs. Clark, she greeted me. What can I do for you? Good morning, Anne, I replied, sitting down in the chair across from her desk. I need to process a large transfer of funds, a charitable donation. She raises her eyebrows. Charities aren't uncommon, but large sums require special procedures. Of course, she nods, pulling out the necessary forms. How much money are we talking about? I name a number, and Mrs. Parker freezes for a moment with pen in hand. It's a really large sum, almost all of my savings, except for a small balance, enough to live on my own for a few years. It's a substantial donation, she says cautiously. Are you sure? Perhaps I should leave some money for emergencies. I've thought it through, I answer firmly. It's a considered decision. She nods and starts filling out the paperwork. She asks for the recipient's details, the purpose of the transfer, and confirms my identity. The procedure takes almost an hour. I have to check the accounts, contact the management to approve such a large transaction, make all the necessary certificates. The funds will be transferred to the recipient's account within 3 business days, Mrs. Parker informs me when all the documents are signed. You will receive a notification when the transaction is complete. Thank you, I say, putting the copies of the documents in my purse. You've been very helpful. I walk out of the bank with a sense of accomplishment. The papers in my purse are the material proof of the decision. There is no turning back now, and it is not frightening. On the contrary, it calms me down. I feel as if I've shed a heavy weight I've been carrying around for months. I walk down Main Street toward the Sunnybrook Orphanage, which is on the outskirts of town. I want to see for myself where my money is going. I want to meet the people who'll be handling it, make sure I made the right decision. The orphanage is housed in a 2-story colonial-style building surrounded by a large area with playgrounds, a garden, and sports facilities. The building is newly renovated, painted a warm yellow color, and the windows are decorated with bright curtains. It looks cozy and friendly, not at all like a state institution. In the reception area, I am met by a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She introduces herself as Diane, the secretary, and asks me why I'm here. My name is Vivian Clark, I say. I made a donation to your institution this morning. I'd like to speak to the director if that's possible. Diane perks up and invites me into the principal's office. Mr. Thomas Riley turns out to be a man of about 45, with graying temples and a calm, accommodating voice. His office is decorated with children's drawings and photographs of alumni. It's clear he genuinely loves his job. Mrs. Clark, what a pleasant surprise, he says, shaking my hand. Diane told me you made a donation. We're very grateful for any support. It's quite a large sum, I explain. I wanted to make sure the money would be spent wisely. Mr. Riley talks about the plans for the institution, renovating the dormitories, updating the kitchen equipment, buying educational materials and computers. He talks about programs of socialization of children, preparing them for independent life, searching for foster families. I listen attentively and realize that these people really care about children, not just performing official duties. Would you like to meet our kids? He suggests. Now it's class time, but in the creative workshop, children draw, and they are always interested in showing their work to guests. I agree without hesitation. We walk through the corridors decorated with children's crafts and wall newspapers. Everything looks clean, well maintained, but most importantly, alive. We hear children's voices, laughter, sounds of games and activities. In the creative workshop, 10 children of different ages sit at tables and work on drawings. The teacher, a woman in her 30s with paints on her apron, introduces me as a guest who wants to see their work. The children are animatedly showing their work. Mashenka, a 5-year-old girl with huge brown eyes, draws a house with a garden and explains that this is her future home, where she will live with her mom and dad. 10-year-old Kolya creates a spaceship and dreams of becoming an astronaut. 13-year-old Lisa draws a portrait of a teacher and says she wants to go to art school. Each child is a separate story, separate dreams and hopes. I look at their faces, listen to their stories, and realize that my money is really needed here, not as a way to buy someone's gratitude or recognition, but as an opportunity to give these children a chance for a better life. Are you planning on becoming our regular benefactor? Mr. Riley asks as we walk back into his office. Maybe, I answer evasively. I want to see how the money is spent first. I don't really know what's going to happen next. I don't know where I'll live in a month, what my relationship with my son will be like, whether I'll be able to find my place in the world. But I know one thing. Today's decision was the right one. I say goodbye to the staff of the orphanage and go back to the city center. I feel calm and light at heart, as I haven't felt for a long time. I go to the cafe where I sat with Jennifer yesterday, order a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie. I sit by the window and watch the passers-by, moms with strollers, elderly couples, students with backpacks. The ordinary life of an ordinary city goes on as normal, and I've become part of something bigger. My story stopped being a story about surviving in someone else's home and became a story about making the world a little better. It's a good feeling to know that you can affect someone's fate. Give someone a chance. I get home at 1:30, just as I'd planned. The house is empty. Christopher and Sarah are at work. I make myself a light lunch, read a book in the living room. Acting as usual, but inside, everything has changed. Now, I don't just live here, enduring humiliation and hoping for the best. Now I have a plan, I have a goal, I have the realization that I am in control of my destiny. When Christopher asks me in the evening how my day went, I reply, good, very good. And that's the plain truth. The following days pass in a strange atmosphere of supposed calm. I behave as usual, getting up early, making breakfast, cleaning the house within the areas I'm allowed, going to the store. But inside, everything has changed. Every action now feels temporary. Every conversation, the last of its kind. I live in a house that I no longer consider my home, with people who are no longer considered my family. Sarah acts like the scandal of 3 days ago never happened. She doesn't apologize, doesn't try to smooth things over, just reverts to her usual pattern of behavior, cold politeness with occasional flashes of irritation. Perhaps she thinks all is forgotten and forgiven. Perhaps she thinks I've accepted my assigned role and will no longer meddle in their lives. Saturday morning, she makes a remark about me leaving crumbs on the kitchen countertop after breakfast. Vivian, she says in the tone of a small child, I told you to keep the common areas clean. Is it so hard to wipe the surface behind you? Before, I would have apologized, rushed to correct the omission, explained that I just didn't notice. Now I calmly take a rag, wipe the countertop, and silently leave the kitchen. No explanations, no excuses. I no longer have to buy their affection at the cost of my own dignity. Sarah stares after me with mild surprise. Perhaps she expected a more emotional reaction, an attempt to please, to ingratiate herself. But I don't play that game anymore. Sunday, I call my cousin Margaret in Oregon. We haven't seen each other in 5 years, but we text regularly for holidays, wish each other happy birthdays, and occasionally call each other. Margaret is 2 years younger than me, widowed 3 years ago, lives alone in a small house in the foothills near Portland. Vivian, she exclaims joyfully when she hears my voice. What a pleasant surprise. How are you? How are you doing at Christopher's? Things are good, I answered evasively. Margaret, do you remember when you told me that there were some small houses for rent in your neighborhood? For the elderly? Of course I remember, I say, curiosity in my sister's voice. Why, are you thinking of moving? Tired of the hustle and bustle of the city? Something like that, I answered. I want a change, a new experience. Tell me more about these houses. Margaret enthusiastically describes a small village about 20 minutes from her house, several one-story cottages built specifically for seniors who want to live independently but have like-minded neighbors. There's a community clubhouse, a library, a medical center, and bus service to the city. It sounds wonderful, I say sincerely. Are the houses often vacant? From time to time. Would you like me to find out? Yeah, please. It's not urgent. But if something comes up in the next few months, of course, darling. Margaret's voice is warm. You know, I'd love it if you lived in the neighborhood. We could see each other more often, go to the theater together, read the same books, discuss them over a cup of tea. After talking to my sister, I have a feeling, for the first time in a long time, that the future might be bright. Margaret has always been a kind, intelligent woman who is easy and pleasant to talk to. We grew up in the same house, played together as children, and supported each other through the difficult teenage years. Then life divorced us to different cities, but the connection did not break. Monday night at dinner, Christopher talks about the problems at work, possible layoffs, department reorganization, the need to work overtime to prove his value to the company. I listen intently, ask clarifying questions, express sympathy. This is still my son, and I care about his problems, even if our relationship has changed dramatically. Maybe you should think about changing jobs. I suggest it. Look for something more stable. It's not easy at my age, Christopher sighed. Especially in this town. Jobs are scarce, and there's a lot of competition. What about other cities? I continue. Sometimes a change of location brings new opportunities. Sarah lifts her head from the phone and looks at me with obvious irritation. Vivian, she says coldly, we agreed on boundaries. Christopher's career issues are a family matter that is best left to outsiders. The word outsiders cuts like a knife. I am an outsider in matters concerning my own son. The woman who gave birth to him, raised him, supported him for 25 years is now considered an outsider in his life. Of course, I answer calmly. I'm sorry. Christopher shifts uncomfortably in his chair, but doesn't contradict his wife. Again, he chooses silence. Again, he chooses peace in the family over justice for his mother. I finish dinner in silence and retire to my room earlier than usual. I sit down at the small table by the window and write a letter to Margaret. I tell her I want to move, ask for help finding a place to live, and warn her that I can come back next month to see what's available. I write it by hand on good paper, choosing my words carefully. This is an important letter. It opens a new chapter of my life. On Tuesday, I begin to quietly prepare for my departure. I sort through my closet, deciding what to take with me and what to leave behind. Lots of clothes I haven't worn in years. I can give them to a charity store. Books that I've reread many times can also be donated. I leave only the most necessary and the dearest to my heart. Photos of my husband, photos of us together, photos of Christopher's childhood. All of this fits into one small box. Papers, jewelry, a few favorite books, warm clothes for winter. Another box. It works out surprisingly small for a lifetime. I call the shipping company, find out the cost of sending things to Oregon. It turns out that 2 boxes can be sent by mail. It's easier and cheaper than trucking. I write down phone numbers, addresses, rates. I plan everything carefully, like a military operation. On Wednesday, I get a reply from Margaret, a cheerful, enthusiastic letter. She has already contacted the manager of the village, found out about vacant houses, even arranged a preliminary inspection. She says she's looking forward to my arrival, that we'll have a real family reunion. Family, a word that takes on new meaning. Family is not necessarily the people you live with under the same roof. Sometimes true family is those who accept you for who you are, who enjoy your company, who don't consider you a burden. On Thursday, Jennifer knocks on the back door with another pot of soup. This time, it's mushroom cream soup, flavorful and thick. I invite her into the kitchen for tea, and we talk about the weather, about the new neighbors moving into the house 2 blocks away, about Jennifer's plans to plant new roses in the front garden. "And how are you, dear?" she asks, staring at me over her cup. "You've been very pensive lately." I hesitate, not sure if I should share my plans. Jennifer's the only person in this town who treats me like a human being, but it's too soon to tell her about the move. Too much could change. "Just thinking about the future," I answer carefully. "About what I want to do next." "That's right," Jennifer nodded. "At our age, it's important to keep going, to look for new interests, new opportunities. Life doesn't end at 70. Her words confirm that my thoughts are correct. I should not sit in a corner and wait to be allowed to be useful. I shouldn't have to accept the role of an unwanted relative who is tolerated out of politeness. Friday morning, the bank calls. Mrs. Parker informs me that the transfer was successful and the funds have been deposited into the orphanage's account. I thank her and hang up the phone with a sense of accomplishment. There is no turning back now. The money has gone where it will do real good. At dinner that evening, Sarah makes another sarcastic remark, this time about me being on the phone too long and keeping her from concentrating on her work. "Next time," she says in a tone of condescending patience, "try to keep your voice down. Not everyone in the house wants to hear your private conversations." "I'll try," I answer calmly, and there's no irritation or resentment in my voice. Sarah looks at me in surprise, probably expecting protests, explanations, apologies. But I don't participate in these games anymore. It just doesn't concern me. Christopher glances back and forth at his wife and me, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its nature. He can see that I've changed, but he can't quite put his finger on what that change is. He probably thinks I've finally come to terms with the situation and accepted the rules of the game. If he only knew how wrong he was. After dinner, I go up to my room and pull an old suitcase out of the closet. The same one I used to take on vacation with my husband when I was young, then used to carry my things when I moved into this house. I check the locks, wheels, handles, everything works properly. Tomorrow I'll start putting the essentials in it. Soon I'll be leaving this house for good, and unlike that day 3 years ago, when I came here with the hope of a new happy life with my family, now I am leaving with a light heart. Because I'm not going from something, I'm going to something. Toward a new life, toward respect, toward people who will appreciate me for who I am. The call rings Tuesday night as we sit in the living room after dinner. Christopher is going over paperwork from work. Sarah is leafing through a magazine, and I'm reading a book in a chair by the window. It's the usual family scene, only without the family warmth. Everyone is busy doing their own thing. No one is talking to anyone. The phone rings insistently, and Sarah rises with an exasperated sigh to answer it. "Hello?" she says in a tone that expresses her displeasure at being disturbed. Listens for a few seconds, then frowns. "I'm sorry, you have the wrong number. Christopher and Sarah Clark live here, not—" She stops halfway through, turns her gaze back to me. "Oh, you mean Vivian Clark? Yeah, she lives here. Just a minute." He hands me the phone with an expression of mild curiosity. "Vivian, it's the bank." I pick up the phone, already suspecting what it might be about, but hoping it's a routine question. "Hello, this is Vivian Clark." "Good evening, Mrs. Clark," came the familiar voice of Mrs. Parker. "Sorry to bother you at home, but we have some questions about your recent transfer. The Sunnybrook Children's Home has requested additional paperwork to process a donation of this size. We need to confirm that the transfer of $800,000 was made voluntarily, and—" I don't listen further because I see Christopher drop the documents on the floor. His face goes pale, his eyes widening with shock. Sarah freezes with the magazine in her hands, her mouth hanging open in surprise. Yes, of course, I answer the phone, trying to remain calm. I'll go to the bank tomorrow morning and get the necessary paperwork. That's fine. I apologize again for the inconvenience. I hang up the phone and turn to my family. Christopher and Sarah are looking at me like they've seen a ghost. $800,000? Christopher says in a shaky voice. Mom, what $800,000 was that woman talking about? The donation I made to the orphanage. I answer calmly, turning back to the book. What donation? Christopher's voice rises an octave higher. Where did you get $800,000 from? Sarah slowly lowers the magazine, and I see something resembling rage light up in her eyes. Vivian? She says very quietly, but there's menace in her voice. What the hell is going on here? Nothing much, I answer, not looking up from my book. I just thought I'd help some kids who need support. $800,000 is not nothing special, Christopher exploded, jumping up from the couch. That's a lot of money. Where did you get it from? I thought you said you didn't get much from Dad. I said I had enough to live on, I clarify. And it's true, I did have enough. Enough out of $800,000? Sarah rises too, and now they're both standing in front of me, like prosecutors standing in front of a defendant. You spent 3 years fooling us, playing the poor widow, and you had a fortune in the bank? I had a fortune, I corrected, now that money is in the hands of children who really need it. There is a silence so thick that I can hear the ticking of the clock in the hallway and the distant sound of cars outside. Christopher and Sarah look at each other, and I can see the different emotions on their faces: shock, anger, incomprehension, and something else that could be called greed. You're crazy, Sarah finally said, and there was a contempt in her voice that made my heart sink. Completely out of your mind, giving $800,000 to some stranger's kids instead of helping your own family. My family doesn't need help, I replied, finally taking my eyes off the book. You have a home, a job, an income. You are young and healthy, and those children are left without everything. Your family? Christopher repeats, and there's pain in his voice. Mom, I'm your son, your only family. How could you make this decision without consulting me? Why would I consult you about my money? I ask, and my voice remains surprisingly calm. It was my savings, and I had the right to dispose of it as I saw fit. Right? Sarah takes a step toward me, and I can see that she can barely contain herself from yelling. What right? You live in our house. We feed you, clothe you, take care of you, and yet you sit on a pile of money and tell us nothing? You feed me? I wonder. I wonder, who makes breakfast every morning? Who cleans the house, does the laundry, goes to the store? Who buys groceries with their own money? It's not the same thing at all. Sarah waves it off. You live here for free, no utilities, no mortgage payments, and all this time you had a lot of money in the bank. It was, I agree. And now it's not. And I don't regret it. Christopher sank down on the couch as if his legs were no longer holding him up. His face is gray and his hands are shaking. Mom, he says, and there are almost tears in his voice. Do you realize what you've done? $800,000? I could have paid off the mortgage. We could have bought a new car, sent future children to good colleges. This was an opportunity to provide for our family for decades to come. Your family is already provided for, I reply. You have everything you need to live. Those kids had nothing. Those kids have a state, Sarah screams, and now she can't hold back. There are taxpayers who run orphanages. All we have is ourselves, and you stole our future from us. I didn't steal anything, I object firmly. It was my money, which I earned together with my husband for 40 years of life together, and I had every right to use it as I saw fit. But it's family money? Christopher gets up and starts pacing the room. Dad would have wanted it to stay in the family to be inherited. He didn't work his whole life so that his money would go to other people's children. These words hit me where it hurts, but I know my husband better than Christopher remembers him. Your father spent his life helping those in need, I say quietly. He supported orphanages, funded scholarships for poor students, bought school supplies for disadvantaged children, and he never put family comfort above human compassion. That was before he had extra money, objected Christopher. And now times are hard, jobs are unstable, the future is uncertain. That money could give us security. Security? I repeat, and for the first time all evening I sound bitter. What security can a man have who's willing to throw his own mother out on the street? You've thought about that, haven't you? About getting rid of me? Sarah and Christopher look at each other, and that look tells me more than any words can. Yes, they've thought about it, talking amongst themselves, making plans. No one threw you out, Sarah says, but her voice is uncertain. We just thought you'd be better off. In a better place. A nursing home, I finish for her. Yes, I remember your stories about your friend's mother-in-law. It was very subtle. So what now? Sarah goes on the offensive again. You gave all that money out of principle to punish us? Congratulations, you've achieved your goal. Now we will all live from paycheck to paycheck, and some strange children will get education and treatment with your money. My money, I emphasize. And it makes me happy to know that it will do some good. Can I cancel the transfer? Christopher asks, turning to his wife. To say that Mom was out of her mind when she made the decision? The words unhinged sound like a slap in the face. My son would call me crazy to get the money back. The transfer can't be undone, I say calmly. The money has already been deposited into the orphanage's account and will be used for repairs, equipment, and educational programs. And I was in perfect health when I made that decision. You were in good health when you decided to bankrupt your own family? Sarah screams. When you disinherited your son from an inheritance that was rightfully his? What right? I ask, and there's steel in my voice. The right of someone who calls his mother an old woman and tells her to get out of the house? By the right of someone who keeps silent when his wife insults his mother? Was I really supposed to leave an inheritance to people who think I'm a burden? Sarah opens her mouth to object, but I continue. You wanted me to leave. You made that quite clear to me. Well, I'm leaving, and I'm taking everything I own with me, including the right to control my own money. You can't just leave, Christopher says, confused. You're my mother. We're family. Family? I laugh bitterly. What kind of family, Christopher? The kind where your mother lives like an unwanted lodger, where she's told where she belongs and what she can and can't do in the house, where she's yelled at and insulted and her only son is silent and smiling. I didn't mean to, he starts, but I interrupt. Didn't mean to what? Hurt me? But you did, every time you chose silence over protecting your mother. Every time you pretended not to notice the humiliation. You chose a side, Christopher, and it's not my side. I get up from the chair, carefully close the book, and place it on the table. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going up to my room. I have to get up early tomorrow. A lot to do at the bank. I leave them sitting in the living room with their shock and rage and calculations of how much money they've lost. I walk up the stairs, feeling my breathing getting easier with each step. Today, all the cards are revealed. No more pretending we're a happy family. No longer do we have to hope that the relationship will work out. Now each knows what the other is thinking, and we can plan for the future without illusions. The night passes restlessly. with the occasional muffled voices of Christopher and Sarah coming from downstairs, apparently discussing what has happened. I can't make out the words, but the intonations are eloquent. Accusations, attempts to find a way out of the situation, or something akin to despair. I lie in bed and listen to these sounds like distant music that no longer concerns me. I get up at 7:30 in the morning as usual, but today I don't go to make breakfast for the family. Instead, I finish packing, putting the rest of my things in my suitcase, checking to see if I've forgotten anything important. The bluebird statue takes pride of place among my clothes, carefully wrapped in a soft sweater. At 8 in the morning, I call the information desk and find out the bus schedule to Portland. It turns out that there is a flight at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just enough time to do the paperwork at the bank and say goodbye to Jennifer. I book a ticket over the phone, give my credit card number for payment. I come downstairs at 9:30 with my suitcase in my hand. Christopher is sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, looking like he's been up all night. His eyes are red, his hair mussed, his shirt wrinkled. At the sight of me and the suitcase, he jumps up from his seat. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asks worriedly. "Where are you going?" "Oregon," I answer calmly, setting the suitcase by the door. "To Margaret's. She found me a nice place to stay." "Oregon?" he repeats, dumbfounded. "But that's the other side of the country. Mom, you can't just move thousands of miles away." "I can," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee from the machine. "I have a bus ticket for the 2 o'clock bus." "A bus?" Christopher clutches his head. "Mom, you're 73 years old. You can't go across the country on a bus." "Why not?" I wonder sincerely. I'm healthy. I have money for a ticket. I have a place to go. Everything is quite reasonable. At that moment, Sarah enters the kitchen in her bathrobe, with a sleepy face and an expression of poorly concealed panic. Apparently, Christopher has already told her about my plans. "Vivian," she says, a forced friendliness in her voice, "let's sit down and talk quietly. No one's going anywhere. We can talk things over in an adult way." "Discuss what?" I ask, taking a sip of coffee. "You've made it very clear that I'm not a part of this. I'm just doing what you wanted me to do." "No one said you were redundant," Christopher says, but his voice is uncertain. Sometimes we have disagreements. It's normal for any family." "Disagreements?" I repeat with a bitter chuckle. "Christopher, your wife called me an old woman and told me to get out. And you smiled. That's not a disagreement. That's the final verdict." Sarah cast a quick glance at her husband, and I can see her realize that her outburst yesterday could cost them dearly. Now that it's revealed that I had money, even if I've already spent it, the attitude changes dramatically. "Vivian," she begins in a conciliatory tone, "I was very upset yesterday. A hard day at work, tired. I said something I didn't mean. You know, people say things in their hearts." "In their hearts, people speak the truth," I replied calmly, "and what they say for the sake of propriety is usually insincere. But you can't be serious about moving because of one fight," Christopher insists. "Mom, we're a family. Families don't break up after the first conflict." "The first?" I'm surprised. "Christopher, it wasn't the first conflict. It was just the first time it was said out loud." Sarah comes closer and sits down at the table across from me. The tension of someone trying to right a serious wrong is evident in her movements. "Look," she says, her voice almost pleading now, "I understand you're upset, and you have a right to be upset. Maybe I've been too harsh lately. The work, the stress, the plans for the future, it's all pressing. But we can turn things around, find a new format for living together that's more comfortable for everyone." "What format do you suggest?" I'm asking out of politeness, even though I've already made my decision. "Well," Sarah looks at her husband uncertainly, seeking support. We can set up a separate area in the house for you, a small kitchen in the basement, for example, or we could convert the garage into a small apartment so everyone can have their own space. I almost laugh at the absurdity of the suggestion. Yesterday, I was an unwanted relative to be sent to a nursing home, and today I'm being offered a separate apartment. What an amazing change of mood overnight. Very generous, I say dryly, but I've already made up my mind. Mom, Christopher sits down next to me and takes my hand in his. Please don't jump to conclusions. Yes, things went too far yesterday, but that's no reason to destroy the family. We can fix everything, start over. I look at his face, genuine concern, almost desperation. He really doesn't want me to leave, but not because he loves me or appreciates my company. It's because he feels guilty, because he realizes what he did was wrong, and he's afraid to leave with that weight on his conscience. You know what the saddest part is, Christopher? I say softly, releasing my hand. The fact that all this concern only came out when it turned out I had money. As long as you thought I was a poor widow who depended on your favor, my place was made clear to me. And now that my options have become known even though I've already spent it, suddenly everything has changed. That's not true, Christopher protested, but he sounded unconvinced. Of course it is, I argue calmly. And it's normal, it's human nature. People have different attitudes toward the rich and the poor, the helpful and the burdensome. But I don't want to play these games anymore. I get up from the table and go to the sink to wash a cup. The movements are familiar, automatic. It's the last time I'll wash dishes in this kitchen. If it's about money, Sarah says carefully, we can discuss compensation. For lodging, food, utilities, set a fair fee so no one feels obligated. What do you want me to pay for? I turn to her. The right to make your breakfast? For the opportunity to do your laundry? For the pleasure of hearing me called a burden? Sarah blushes, realizing the absurdity of my offer. It's not about money, I continue. It's about respect. And respect can't be bought or earned by obedience. You either have it or you don't. At 10:30, I leave the house with my suitcase, heading to the bank to do the final paperwork. Christopher and Sarah walk me to the door, still hoping to change my mind. But their arguments are growing weaker. They realize they've lost, but they can't accept defeat. Mom, think again, Christopher says when I'm standing in the doorway. Do you really want to spend the rest of your life away from your only family? I want to spend the rest of my life where I'm appreciated, I answer. And that's not here. At the bank, Mrs. Parker greets me with a professional smile, but I see curiosity in her eyes. News of the large donation apparently has already traveled all over the staff. All the documents are ready, she says, handing me a folder of certificates. The transfer was successful. The orphanage has already confirmed receipt of the funds. They are very grateful for your donation. Thank you, I say, putting the documents in my purse. Now I need to close the account and get the remaining amount in cash for the move. The procedure takes half an hour. The money I have left is enough to start a new life in Oregon, rent a place, get settled, live for a few months with few restrictions. It's enough to find my place in the new city. After the bank, I go to Jennifer's house to say goodbye. Vivian, darling, are you going on a trip? She asks, taking off her gardening gloves. Moving, I answer simply. To Oregon, to my sister's place. Jennifer's face turns serious. She invites me into the house, sits me down in the living room, puts the kettle on. We drink tea and cookies, and I tell her a brief version of events. No details of the family conflict, but enough for her to get the gist. I understand, Jennifer nods when I finish. Sometimes it takes courage to start over, especially at our age. I'm not scared, I say honestly. On the contrary, I feel a sense of anticipation. I haven't felt anything like this in a long time. Jennifer hugs me goodbye, a big, warm, real hug. She gives me her address, tells me to be sure to write, promises to come visit when I'm settled. Take care of yourself, dear, she says. And remember, it's never too late to be happy. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I return home to get my suitcase. The house is empty. Christopher and Sarah are at work. On the kitchen table is a note from Christopher. Mom, please wait until tonight. I need to talk to you. Don't leave until we discuss things calmly. I read the note, fold it in half, and throw it in the trash. There's nothing more to discuss. All the important words have already been said. I grab my suitcase and head for the door. I look back one last time at the house where I've lived for 3 years, the kitchen where I made hundreds of breakfasts, the living room where I read in the evenings, the stairs I climbed every day to my room. No nostalgia or sadness. This house never became my home. It was a temporary shelter, a place where I tried to find my place and didn't. Now I'm going where that place really is. At the bus station, I board a bus to Portland. The other passengers are young people with backpacks, an elderly couple with travel bags, a middle-aged woman with a child. Ordinary people going about their business, toward their goals. I am one of them, just a person moving toward a new life. The bus starts at exactly 2 o'clock. I sit at the window and watch as Sigourney is left behind. Familiar streets, houses, stores. It was all part of my life, but it hasn't become part of me. Real life begins now, on this bus, on this road leading into the unknown. I take the letter from Margaret out of my purse and reread her warm words about a future together. I remember the faces of the children at the orphanage, their drawings, their dreams. I think of how my money will help them get an education, find families, become happy people. Fields, forests, small towns float by outside the window. Ahead are mountains, the ocean, a new home, new people, new opportunities. Ahead is a life where I will be appreciated for who I am, not tolerated out of politeness. I close my eyes and allow myself to smile. For the first time in months, I'm truly happy. Not because I've run away from my problems, but because I'm finally walking towards a solution, to a life that is mine and mine alone. The bus takes me west, towards the sunset, towards the future, and I don't look back anymore.